Okay.
Go! Hi, Mr. Endrizzi.
Hello, Ms. Arke.
Okay, so you've had some experience with stem cell research, and you worked on the Human Genome Project, which isn't stem cell research, as you've told me, but it has to do with DNA, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'd say the Human Genome Project came first and allows people to do very specific types of work with stem cell research.
Okay. So, when you were working with the Human Genome Project, what were some of the fears of the opponents of, like, the research, like, when you had stem cell research, and
Yep.
what were, like, the opposing views?
Okay. Well, when I worked on the Human Genome Project, people didn't really have a problem with that per se. I mean, there are some people that are just against technology in general. But as far as genetic types of work, the Genome Project, which is sequencing DNA, was probably the least controversial. At the time, which late 1990s, early 2000, at that time people started creating stem cells. And the concern over it was taking it requires embryos. So people would take human embryos and they would be destroyed in order to make the stem cells. People that want to do it, the compromise they're seeking is to go to in vitro fertilization clinics, and in the process of fertilizing an egg and making various embryos, only some of those embryos are implanted in the mother, and the rest of the embryos are incinerated, which no one seems to have a problem with, except for people who are against in vitro fertilization. But the vast majority of voters don't have a problem with in vitro fertilization. But the problem then comes into, well, whether we should use those disposed embryos or not. And scientists say, well, you're killing them anyway, so we should be able to use them. And opponents say, no. And my understanding, and I can't speak for anyone, but just what I understand the argument to be against using these embryos is that there's really 2 points. One, you are essentially taking a human life and experimenting on it. And I think people see that as a slippery slope, that as soon as we start doing that, then the logical end to that is to actually create human beings that are essentially, experimental organisms. The other problem people have with it in a more fundamental way is you're killing an embryo, you're killing a human life. And I think the reason they're okay with in vitro fertilization is that you're trying to create a life. And so disposing of the leftover embryos is okay, but if you were to try to then do experiments with that, I think that's what people have a problem with, is it's somehow less humane. So that's my understanding of it.
What would you think about, like, what would be some of the fears of even using the adult stem cells? Like, what could go wrong with that, in your understanding?
Okay. As far as morally and ethically, there's not a lot of opposition to adult stem cells, because an adult donor can say, take cells from my bone marrow or other parts of my body, it won't kill me, it won't hurt that bad, and you can create tissue culture experiments, or in laboratories you can work on cells and learn something about how these cells work. The challenge is that you can't make every kind of cell from adult stem cells. If you take embryonic stem cells, you have a lot more potential to create a lot of different types of cells. So you can get a lot more work out of an embryonic cell. So ethically, I don't think there's at least I'm not aware of any huge issues with adult stem cells. From a technological point of view, people might be concerned that whatever technologies come out of it might be misused down the road. For example, if you figure out that in a certain race of people, their liver cells can be damaged